What are you doing?
I'm listening to this.
Is your camera on?
No.
Well, 6:34. I think it's funny when we started at 6:30, obviously, there was about 15, 20 more that popped in as we got started. So, um, first of all, I put the meeting chat in play. So if you have any questions when I'm going along, I'll try and address them at the end. Um, Most of it's going to be a presentation, a slideshow presentation, to where you can kind of follow along. I'm recording this as well. So I will send this out to families afterwards. So I guess would someone unmute just to make sure, can you actually hear me? That's the biggest question on Zoom.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll just real quickly, for those of you that don't know me, introduce myself. I'm Peter Voiles. I've been actually at Washington Premier. A lot of families know me, but I've been at Washington Premier since 2004. Feeling my age a little bit. Yeah, this is just to kind of give you a background of what's really happened with this kind of position. So years ago, we kind of had a very similar position that Rob Walker was completing or kind of working through. Roy stepped in a little bit, and then to be honest, with the timing of everything, it actually disappeared a little bit during COVID, which I think some of us would argue was probably the most important time to have someone kind of advising guys through the process. I actually had a U19 team at that point and was able to help them through it. In addition to, in addition to my work at Washington Premier, I've been an assistant coach at Pacific Lutheran University for almost 20 years. Well, it has been 20 years. I've coached high school, gone all the way through and taken numerous teams from U17, U17 through U19. I just want to say right away, I definitely do not have all the answers. For those of you that have really kind of immersed yourself in the process and tried to find as much information you can about what college recruiting looks like, I apologize if some of this in the beginning feels redundant and things you already know. I do hope, that through this, there's at least, a couple takeaways that you have, or just a different, maybe just gives you a different perspective on what the process is. Like I said, feel free at any point to drop messages in the chat, and I'll try and address them at the end if it's not covered. So yeah, I will share screen, get the presentation going. And like I said, as we go, let me know. Well, that's definitely not what you want to see. So, all right. In addition, I'm also a second grade teacher. So having a little flashback PTSD years ago during COVID when this is how I was actually teaching. So not the most enjoyable way to instruct, but I know it's a way to meet the masses at times. So first, first thing I actually wanted to talk about, probably should be a space there, but is our new sports recruits platform. We've received quite a few questions about this recently. Here's the rundown of what happened. For years, our club has used a program called College Fit Finder. College Fit Finder was bought by a company 6-7 months ago, and then it was absorbed again by another company called Sports Recruits. Back in, probably late August, Cheryl and I were able to meet with Sports Recruits. Really liked the presentation they put out, like the platform they were going to provide for players. We asked them at that point, just in the midst of what everything was going on, to kind of do a rollout in early October. some of you may have already seen that right from the beginning, they apparently the minute they got their list, they started sending out information immediately, which didn't give us as a club really any time to transition into it. Didn't give Cheryl time to make adjustments to the website and so on. With that being said, there will be next week, Cheryl McCurry is going to send out a follow-up message for players that have not been able to connect to the Sports Recruit platform. The Sports Recruits did send an email back in September, might have even been late August. And I think what's important to note on that, because I've had a couple individual players ask about it as their buddies have got connected. What's important to note about that first email is that it would have gone to essentially the email address that you register with the club. So whether it's the one through Blue, the Blue Sombrero or whatever it may be, whatever you use to register for the club and whatever email address you use to make payments and things along those lines. So a lot of players are looking for this email in their own email address, but it's actually connected with their families and their parents have it. So tons of information coming out there. We're actually going to send out a video through the Sports Recruit webinar that Sports Recruits just completed that really gets the players set up. I suppose we had a choice on whether or not we were actually going to use Sports Recruits. The platform itself is much cleaner, much more user-friendly than anything College Fit Finder is able to provide.
Oh boy, hopefully that's what it is.
All right. Okay. Just looking for the ability to mute a little bit if possible. We got a couple microphones on if you could check that and mute. All right. So just like I said, I'll go really quickly through this because this is a lot of common knowledge, but I think it's important, a couple of things to note in here. Really kind of the differences between Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3. And then later in the presentation, I'll touch even on the NAI aspect of it. I am coming from a Division 3 perspective, so this is a quote from myself that really at times the differences between the levels don't necessarily reflect the level of competition. Our program Division 3 wise every year in exhibition games does very well against some local Division 2 programs and know that we would be able to compete at the mid-major level on the Division 1 level. That's not saying that we're going to run up to UW and expect to actually have a friendly contest, but at the same time, I think players when they're younger, they look at the level, they look at the scholarship opportunity, they look at what it may be, and get so zoned in on what it may be. My whole intention with this presentation is for players to really understand that they need to find what is right for them and what's right for their soccer opportunities. We do know Division 1 and 2 programs can avoid full and partial scholarships. I'll touch on that a little bit. It's important to note that those are awarded 1 year at a time. That's not a guarantee. Most of the time, it'll cover the 4 years. Important to note that at 1 and 2, Division 1 and 2, the full scholarships are very rare, and you'll kind of see the numbers behind that. Again, common knowledge, but Division 3 programs cannot award athletic scholarships, and it's really only need-based and merit-based scholarships that players are able to award, basically. So definitely want to go quickly through this. So just by the numbers, though, there's 205 Division 1 programs, approximately roster size of about 30. This is important to note. Maximum scholarships for the program is 9.9. So when we're talking about full scholarships available, you're going to be really hard pressed to find a player that's on a full scholarship when they're trying to divvy things up and have a complete roster of 30. So there's about 6,200 players with Division 1 scholarships. Division 2, their only main difference, I mean, the number of Division II programs is similar. The only main difference is they lose that 9/10 of a scholarship. So if we're looking for a number of, about 18 or about 1,900 Division II full soccer scholarships available. And there's a bigger number. There's 427 Division III men's programs at the time. We do know that with Division III, there's no athletic scholarships. It's going to be highly based on the scholarships granted are available through, academics and just kind of need-based and merit-based. Almost 13,000 Division III men's soccer athletes. NAIA. There could be some questions asked about this potentially. This is, I'll just try and alleviate some of those questions to begin with. NAIA is a completely, honestly, separate and almost different animal. As far as like recruiting restrictions and what they can do and timing on things, there's not a lot of rules with NAIA programs. I actually at the time played an NAIA program for part of my college, and I was coaching a older team down at the Portland Showcase, and it was my old college coach, and he literally came over and sat on the bench and started talking to the players, which from an NCAA in the middle of the showcase, from an NCAA perspective, 100% illegal. However, there's some extremely good opportunities out there if that's the school that really matches. The NAIA schools would consider themselves Division I programs. However, they're kind of, in my opinion, a little bit more equivalent to the Division II. A lot of international players at NAIA as well. So just real quick on this, this number is interesting. When there's close to 5 million high school age boys, are participating in youth soccer in the United States. With those roster selections, it is. Hold on one second. I'm getting a few text messages. Sorry. So within that, currently rosters within the NCAA and NAIA, 31% of those players are foreign. I was looking just recently at the Marshall University roster, and with 34 players, I believe they had 3 American citizens. And so the whole intention of this is not to tell you that these are not opportunities, but just to tell you about the process and the challenges behind it. So I think hopefully this resonates throughout the entire piece. We can talk about ID camps. We can talk about, different programs that allow you assistance to get recruited. There's companies that you can pay. Through my experience and through this process in the last 20 years, truly believe that players will reap the rewards of really the work they put into it. And the most important thing that you can do, that individual player can do, and this is really where parents have to find a separation in this, is really be their own advocate and show persistence and really perseverance in contacting these schools. We're talking about 1.1% are playing at the Division I level, right? These players are sometimes found early, they're sometimes found whatever it may be, but the part anytime I'm talking to a player, whether I'm coaching them or just working in this capacity, your ability to push and promote yourself at the appropriate level is the way to get found. Yeah, ID camps help. Your club coach can potentially help on depending on what level, but in the end, right, players with their communication towards these schools and the information and how they present it is the way that they will be found. And I will touch on that a little bit later as well. first step in the process. So I understand on the Zoom call, we're going to have everything from, you know what I mean, graduates of 2024 all the way up to, 26 or 27 in here. So there's not a one, one, sorry, I'm going to say it, that there's not a one size or one presentation that fits all. But I think really narrowing down the search so that you can be intentional and persistent and in what you want in the communication in the schools you're looking for is the most important thing. In your search, is your main focus the soccer? Is it the academics? Is it a combination of both? And really pushing towards creating a wish list. How important, I hope the academics, I mean, like I said, I am a teacher myself. I hope the academics are extremely important, but really creating that wish list of what you're looking for in the school, academically, athletically, socially, really the location. If your son has no interest in being anywhere farther than Colorado, I think that's important to know right from the beginning. The cost of the school, kind of the environment. I think the size of the school is important. Really, if you're going to look down that Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, even to NAIA, when you're kind of looking down that order of what it may be, the size of the schools match. A lot of the Division 1 programs are, pushing 30,000 students, where the Division 2s are hovering around 10. In the Division 3 liberal arts schools and a lot of the NAIA schools are going to be on that smaller end, 3,000 to 4,000 students. That in itself is a choice that, I think your athlete has to make because, if you want to be watching a football game, a Division 1 football game on a weekend and soccer doesn't work out, that might be the deciding factor for your player. And I can't stress this enough, that really just kind of creating, what do you really want? What do you really want? Do you want that school to be the highest academic piece possible? When you're looking at the athletic side, what piece, what parts of their athletic program and even their success. I think that's an important thing to note. Also another, in addition to, finding out, before you start looking for schools, I think it's really important to self-analyze. And this is where in the past I've had players, honestly, I don't want to say make mistakes, but they were so set on what level they believed they were in, but didn't necessarily talk within their coaches or maybe didn't even listen. And what would happen is that a lot of these players would, be Division 1 or bust. And then what would happen is they would close the doors on potential opportunities in other areas. And by the time they got to the end of the process, they were left with far less options than they actually, had to begin with. 2 ways to really, identify the appropriate level. As a college recruitment advisor, as much as I'd love to have the knowledge of every high school age player in our club, you can imagine the time piece behind that would almost be almost unfeasible. The first step in that is to really talk to the coach or the director in your area. And what I mean by that is, whether it's the RCL director or whether it's, the ECNL director on the boys side, and really, start with the coach first, but really help them identify where you're probably best suited to play collegiately so that you can really focus in on those areas. On the men's side, John York has can help and assist in that. Kevin Skinner can help. Well, I guess I don't need to address the girls' side, but Scott Ford as well. My second piece that I would really encourage in identifying the appropriate level is to really go see games. I intentionally put an exclamation point there. At this point, it is a little later in the seasons, but depending on where you live, right? I live in Sumner, but within a 40-minute drive each direction, you can find a game that really captures all the levels so that you can see the different levels. Community colleges are obviously going to be a lot closer to everybody, but in the Division III level, men's and women's, you can go watch a University of Puget Sound in Tacoma or a Pacific Lutheran game. Division II, you can venture down to the Lacey area and watch St. Martin's, or head up north and watch Seattle Pacific. Division I, both in the Seattle area, you get a different level there. Not this year, but normally a different level with the University of Washington, Seattle University. And then even within the NAIA programs, there's Northwest universities out of Kirkland. And we actually ended up with a player out of our club that just graduated last year that's playing at Northwest and having a very good experience. In addition to that, if you can't make a game, if you can't actually go and watch the live games, I would encourage that you can access, all the way down to the community college level, access their games through live stream, and the actual game time itself, or even more so, there's recordings. A lot of these are posted to YouTube later. So I told you this would be a little redundant, but really the process of how do I get recruited? I truly believe, and I can't say this enough, and that's why it's going to be so redundant. First and foremost, it's that player's responsibility to actively participate in the recruiting process. I'll touch on that later, but in addition to that is really preparing academically, not just athletically. There are players, the players within our club, and if you're going to just look at the Division I or Division II level, a player with a high GPA and high test scores 100% are a more recruitable player to those universities than someone that's going to be accepted into the school for the main reason that players, I'm going to use Seattle University for an example. They have their limit of 9.9 scholarships, but if they're recruiting a player that has a 3.9 and higher test scores, they know right off the bat, just based on those numbers, what sort of academic assistance and what sort of merit scholarships that player is going to get, and then can tailor a package athletically that then allows that player to be able to financially move into that university. It's going to be really the same at all levels. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Division III is completely different, as almost all scholarships are need-based and merit-based. I can just tell you from personal experience in this last year, there's a player that is currently playing at Pacific Lutheran University for us that his academic package at PLU was far superior, and he's paying significantly less than he was actually going to be paying at Western Oregon, which is a Division II program, at Western Oregon, with an athletic scholarship. So I think that kind of segues into, really researching and understanding the options that these schools provide, researching and understanding about the schools that you're contacting, their success and what programs they offer academically. And then, again, a little redundant, but having a good self-awareness of the level you should be reaching towards, right? Your coach can help, but what every player I've ever worked with, whether or not what your coach says or what the director says or whatever you're feeling about yourself, if you have the time to commit to reaching out to schools that you know, the schools that might be considered a reach school for you, absolutely go for it. And, you know, the redundancy again, most players just don't get recruited. They really market themselves. And it's done on an individual basis. It's not done through the $3,000, you know, sports recruit, not our program itself, but the $3,000 you know, program that these guys will try and sell you on and tell you, hey, we're going to reach out to all these schools and contact all these schools for you. It's the individual interest from the players that really draws the coaches into them. As I said, that kind of that recruiting process, it's consistent, persistent, and, you know, communication with those colleges. It's emails, it's phone calls. You know, in the day of cell phones and texting and, you know, social media, encouraging players all the time. I mean, those coaches have an office phone, right? Give yourself a chance to actually have a conversation with them and let them know you're interested. You know, when we come through this, you know, come through the actual process and the emailing, you know, having a resume, you know, having quality video, which, you know, I'll touch on a little bit in 2 weeks if you're able to join. The GPA, connecting with them and letting them know their schedules and your contact information. You know, players, you know, players with a great sign off and header of, you know, what graduating class they are and, you know, their GPA and things along those lines. Sometimes, you know, when those college coaches are getting hundreds of emails, you know, in a week, sometimes they're just going to scroll down and really look at that information and decide whether or not it's a recruitable athlete for them. When you actually get into that communication with the coaches, you know what I mean? Giving them regular updates, you know what I mean? How your season's been going, how you know, the season's going for you individually, updating your video if necessary, you know, communicating those game schedules, especially for local schools, you know, and for those athletes that are attending showcases, you know, really communicating before and after the showcases. You know, simple enough as, you know, here's my, you know, I'm interested in your school, here's my game schedule, but then reaching out afterwards, you know, not did you get to see me play, but I hope you got a chance to see me play. Looking for that feedback because it's, as you know, the numbers are what they are. You know what I mean? There's so many athletes and really the persistence from the athletes is leads to their success. In the past, as I mentioned, if a college coach does communicate with you, important to that piece and that fact to where, you know, we've got an opportunity to at least reply to them, even if it's not in your top 10, and not closing those doors. Not closing those doors to where, you know, you try and go back to this school and they're like, well, sorry, we're done with our recruiting process. We didn't even think you were interested in us. You would be shocked, right? And I hope this doesn't come across sexist, but you'd be shocked on the boys' side how often that happens. You know, as a coach, not necessarily as this new position I have, but as a coach, how many times the college coach will say, I've communicated, I just haven't heard anything back from him. So I just assumed he wasn't interested, you know, responding to those emails. ID camps, this is probably something I could do an entire separate Zoom call on. And I hope this addresses the questions. A few of us have reached out before this meeting about ID camps. I'm just going to be careful how I say this. ID camps are a positive and at some levels can be a real negative. Transparency 100% in the fact that there's a reason there's a cost to an ID camp. Some of the costs on some of the ID camps that I see is close to insane. There's two different versions. One are ID camps that are put on independently not through the school itself, but put on independently by, I mean, honestly, someone just putting together an ID camp and inviting coaches in. My advice would be to steer completely away from those. There is a financial, there's a financial piece to it, and there's the person who's sending you that email, the person who's running that company is making money off of that. Now, in the same turn, obviously, players are making, colleges are making money off their ID camps as well. That does not mean that these are bad opportunities. Attending those ID camps, especially in your early years when kind of your sophomore year or even so much your junior year, but your sophomore year in particular, if it's a local school that you're interested in, it gives them an opportunity, gives those coaches an opportunity to actually have a conversation with you legally. We'll touch, I think it popped up in the chat. NCAA, it did actually. So NCAA cannot actually, sorry, the rules are a little different between the levels, and it's something you can research. It's not part of my slides, but for Division I and Division II, an official contact and them reaching out to the players cannot happen until after June 15th of their senior year. Or sorry, their sophomore year. I'm sorry if I said senior year, their sophomore year. So the summer going into their junior year is when NCAA coaches can connect with players and contact players. The communication does happen beforehand. There are, players on the girls' side that are making verbal commitments in their sophomore year, which is not recommended on my end. But that communication is from the colleges through the coach and then via that player. They actually cannot actually communicate with them. And that's going to be the same for official visits, official visits to the school and so on. Okay. Division III is slightly different in the sense that they can communicate with those players before their sophomore year, but there's still restrictions on that as far as what types of communication and what it cannot be. Okay. Something else I met there. I'm trying to manage the chat a little bit too as I'm going along, so I apologize for the pause in what I'm doing. Every school, via their website, almost every school has a college recruitment questionnaire that you can fill out. I would certainly, if it's a school you're interested, I would start here because it really puts you into their database and their database with prospective athletes. And as they're looking to do that, it just puts you into their database so that it's, it helps when you email them the first time and you're not a complete unknown. Okay. Touch real quick on the highlight video. In 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, the plan is to, really give you some examples of a quality highlight video. I'm just going to touch on it, briefly and touch on the email piece as well, because we have some of our older boys that are traveling relatively soon. My biggest piece, and this is actually work I've already done this summer. I've had players actually send me their highlight videos and ask for feedback. The biggest thing I would suggest is that it's no more than 5 minutes long. In itself, with the amount of highlight videos that these coaches get, in my opinion, if they're making it more than 2 minutes, it's probably impressive. So with that, there's two pieces. One, I think it's really important that players highlight different components of the game. If you are a 9 or a 7 or 11, it's the easiest thing to do just to create a highlight video of you scoring goals or finding assists. It's going to leave them with questions, right? Out of that position, I'm using strikers and front players as an example. How can you defend, right? do you actually have the qualities to keep the ball wide or set a direction for the players in behind you? From a outside back perspective, or a center back perspective, or even a holding center mid perspective, you know, a highlight video filled of that player, winning, the first 13 clips of that player winning a ball. Great. That's really what we're looking for in a defender. The question is then, does that video continue to show your ability to distribute, right? Are you making the right decisions after you win the ball? A lot of our teams are using trace. Okay, not all. Okay, but that doesn't mean that a highlight video still can't include these things. With those trace highlights, really using sorry about the redundancy in the words here, but they're using that highlight tool to really make sure they see in that clip what player you are, so they can focus on the movements that you're making and really the decisions you make. Trace or Vio, or who if you have an amazing parent that gets up on a ladder with their camera, sometimes that video quality is what it is, and really being able to highlight that, and that can be done through the trace is the easiest way to do it. However, there's different video platforms that allow players to really cut themselves up, cut their clips up, and honestly through YouTube, whatever it may be, but really highlighting what you're doing. Not going to necessarily say this is a suggestion, but a lot of players will include their highlight video, but then we'll also include a link to a full game with their videos. And where that can really help is if they watch if they're watching your highlight video and they see interest, but then they have questions about certain aspects of the game. Like I said, if your entire highlight video is you scoring goals or creating an assist, and they want to know how you defend, a lot of players will include a link to a full game with their video. And so they can really the coach themselves can get a sense of their movement off the ball. How often that's actually utilized, I have no idea. I can't take a poll of all the coaches in the country. I will tell you at a PLU perspective and a Division III perspective, I have multiple times clicked on that full game link, obviously not sitting down for 90 minutes and watching their entire game, but to really get a sense of what level the game is at and what players are doing individually. So really, in my opinion, these are the separators. As much as I wish this wasn't the case, well, no, the grades, absolutely. Athleticism is a big separator. I'm going to be very biased in this opinion. I could argue that the level that at times we play at CLU is a much better and more attractive soccer style than what you're going to see at other levels. However, if we took our team down to Stanford, we're going to get run over because 11 versus 11, they're just going to be more athletic than we are. And a lot of times that is the separator. This third bullet point, which I think is really important, is really the character of the athlete. When I received calls of players that I was actually coaching, if they're calling me, they've already made the decision as a player, as a soccer player. They've made the decision, yeah, this is a player that we want. This is a player that's of high quality. This player is going to match us soccer-wise with their ability to play and impact the game. The questions that those coaches are asking is, what kind of teammate is this person, right? What sort of what's their consistency at training, whether they're there, whether the attendance or whether or not it's just how hard do they work in training? Are they're a player that kind of coasts during training but shows up during games? Those are the types of questions that college coaches are asking their club coaches, right? college coaches are very confident in what they do, and they believe that if that's a player that they want from a soccer perspective, they don't need to hear from that coach and, hear from that coach on what type of soccer player this is. Now, with that being said, your coaches individually absolutely can connect with college coaches on your behalf, right? And some of the soccer piece will come into it, but a lot of that conversation is going to be about what is this person bringing as an individual to my program, not just as an athlete, but as a simplest terms putting it, a human being, right? They know that, if they've got a roster of 30 guys and two are toxic, and not the type of guys you want to be a part of the program and bought in, those are guys that they'll shy away from. And those really are a lot of times the separators in what's happening, right? So, okay, I'm going to go much deeper into this a couple weeks from now. I just have kind of 3 example emails that I'm going to touch on. Probably should have started with the one that's not the best here in the beginning, but this is just an example. Names crossed out a little bit, just an example of an email at some point I received that I truly believe has some positive qualities to it, and I'm going to touch as to why. Not going to read the entire email to you, but a couple things that stand out in this email. One, initially they are identifying with their graduation year in their position. You read this email and you can see that this player isn't just we kind of certain emails that you read and we just kind of cast, it looks like the players are just casting this big broad net to kind of see what they catch, throwing it out over, it's the same email sent to 400 schools and maybe somebody will have an interest. This player in particular, you can see has actually done some work to research the university they're going to play at. They could have added some specifics, but as to how our season's going and things along those lines, that would take it to an excellent level. They, have very brief and note what they are. And then obviously you can tell this is an older one since say he's attending Surf Cup in 2022. But, really asking and hoping that someone can watch him play. And in following up with a question that's like, what steps do I need to take to potentially, get in communication and asking a question, hoping for a response. So again, you're going to look over this one and think, wow, it's got some length to it. This is a good example of a schedule. The highlight link is in there. To that point, the only thing that I hate to say this, the only thing that this player probably changed in the email that he sent to Whitworth University or sent to Western Washington University was really the sentence about attending Pacific Lutheran and playing soccer for the Lutes. It's crazy how many times we'll get an email and it's just an email that you can tell was sent to somebody else because they have the wrong school's name in there. And I'm going to be honest, that's a pretty quick swipe across. You know what I mean? Not interested if that player is not interested enough in telling, to look over their email and make sure that they're sending it to the right school. One last one. I think this is pretty straightforward. There we go. Right? Not an email that we're going to spend a whole lot of time on. The only thing that I would certainly give this player credit for is that he in his email sign off page, he's giving us some information as far as his GPA with an attachment of his highlight video. not directed at any coaches, hasn't even spent the time to just see who the coaches are there. So touch on that a little bit later. With the emails, I think including a highlight link is absolutely important. You may, I'm not going to give you an example, but sometimes the email addresses that come through really appropriate and professional. There's been some pretty funny ones in the last few years of it's more an email address that their friends might think is funny, not necessarily a college coach. Adding a resume to the email and really talking about some of the things you do at school other than soccer and potential references, even from teachers, is can be a nice addition. And then that last piece, which is again I've touched on, is really being attentive to responses to emails. With the idea of being careful not to be obnoxious. The process itself is not something that I like. It's encouraging players to be over the top and communicate over and over and really keeping track of the communication that they're sending. I can really tell you that too much, there isn't really anything is too much. When you get to the persistence in it is you're going to send communication and not get anything back. And it's really hard for players to then step up and say, well, I didn't hear anything back from them from my first email. I'm not going to email them again. Obviously, they have no interest. If you are trying to connect with coaches in the fall, men's or women's, there's a very good chance you might not get a response. It's they're locked in to winning their conference, locked into whatever it may be, locked into their season, and not getting a response in September or October or November at times is just what it is. And I'm not making excuses for any of these college coaches, but really communicating and really being persistent in your communication
That's important.
is absolutely the best way to be. So, okay. So I will end this because I'm going to check the chat. The chat actually looks okay. It's okay. If anyone actually has any individual questions, I'd love to try and address them here. I know I've kind of rambled here for about 45 minutes, which just happens. I saw this in the chat. Does Watchman provide templates for resumes and emails to players? At this point, no. But Joanne, I think that's a very good potential piece. If you're talking about templates for emails, that is something that I was going to address in a couple of weeks. There's not going to be a straight template, but the idea and the format of it, absolutely. Resumes are just going to be just pretty straightforward as far as what a template will look like. It's gonna include all the information about what you've done, what team you're playing for, what you've done in the past. In addition to, as I touched on before, is really kind of that heavy academic piece.
So I have a quick follow-up.
Yes.
My son is in ninth grade now, and I know you're not trying to maybe delineate among all the various grades in high school in this presentation, but if there's any quick takeaways about what ninth graders ought to be thinking about right now.
Absolutely. I think real kind of early in the presentation is where I think ninth graders should be focused, is really trying to do two things. Now, especially on the boys' side, physicality, athleticism, bodies change significantly from a freshman to a senior. I think really the most important thing for a ninth grader is really two things. is one starting to get that initial sense of what level that they believe that they are, what level that they believe that they're going to be best suited for. But then also I do believe this most importantly is really kind of identifying kind of those things in the beginning of the size of school that they're interested in. I had a conversation with a player that said, I don't think that a school of 24,000 students is going to be the best fit for me. And it's amazing how quickly that narrows down the search for a player. At the same time, a player might say, I just can't see myself at being in a college campus that's about the size of my high school. Again, that will narrow down the search on the opposite end of things. But as ninth graders, absolutely. I think there's if anything, I think this presentation is actually a little more tailored towards that freshman and sophomore year. In the sense that it's really about being intentional about finding what you want academically, and then providing those opportunities for you to see the different levels. Whether it's through video or whether it's through live game performances. And I know a lot of players do go up and see like a lot of players in our club do go up and watch the University of Washington, but really diversifying within that to see what the difference between University of Washington and going and watching the Seattle Pacific versus Western game at the Division II level, up at Interbay, or dropping down to see on whatever weekend it is, University of Puget Sound versus Pacific Lutheran, stretching out to go and see what is the community college going to be the right fit for me? Is that a good spot for me to be for a year and then potentially move from there? So, as a ninth grader, I think it's really important to really just hope, not to narrow things down. I mean, still keep that net broad, pushing those things out there, but at the same time, really identifying what's going to be the best fit for them. So not sure if that helped, but
Yeah, it does. It also sounds like we're going to get a little more information about the sports recruits and
yes,
how we can utilize that to help with some of this as well. Is that right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's coming. Like I said, I don't necessarily know how that miscommunication happened in that first, the hope is that between Cheryl McCurry and I, that we were going to be presenting, and kind of unrolling and kind of pushing it out to the club from our spot. But the sports recruit platform just flat out saw email addresses that we thought they were going to load in their database and started sending all this communication. I will tell you that sports recruit platform is one of the reasons we went to it and pushed towards it. Is it's extremely user friendly. They have tools on that actual platform that can help those players in that process that I talked about, narrowing down their search. Honestly, to be honest, it's some real incredible tools in the sense that you can just highlight your interest of what level it is and potentially what majors. I do understand that a freshman in high school is not going to have a lot of. I mean, I've got a junior in high school and I don't know what she's doing half the time anyway. So the idea of actually looking at a major, but it can be sorted through size of school, locations of school, level of school, and really give some players a good sense of what there is out there and their interest. So
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one in the chat about running start. Academically, running start doesn't affect recruitment at all in a negative sense. Some schools absolutely, with a player that does running start and actually completes that AA, and completes their associate's degree, does add to the recruitability of that player. There are some schools that just have automatic enrollment for anyone that's completed their associate's degree. And so in that sense, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's really just a benefit to that program knowing that player is going to get in. They don't have to connect with admissions and whatever it may be. And then at the same time, there's a lot of scholarships attached, you know what I mean? Sometimes with Run and Start, depending on that university. So let's see if there's. Sorry, there's nothing else in the chat. If there was any other questions you wanted to unmute. Before that happens, I think what I do want to really push out and encourage, and it has been happening. It has been happening throughout the summer. I do have, and I believe it was in the email that Cheryl sent out last week, that I do have an independent email address to really kind of respond and answer questions. It's the best one. I have another email address on the actual website that's more of a kind of personal account, even though I try and use it for soccer. If it didn't come across, it should have been come across on an email, but it's really just collegewpfc@gmail.com. That's going to be the best one for you to reach me at, so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of everything else, Costco and whatever it is, Fred Meyer rewards. I've got that kind of set up, and it's been a very simple way. I will spend a lot of time responding to that actually when my son's at practice or things along those lines. I try and separate home and work a little bit. But that's going to be for kind of those individual piece, and the idea of, hey, I'd love for if your son reaches out and says, I'd love for him to take a look at my highlight video, it's a great email address to utilize. So. Right. Now, was there any other questions? I don't want to cut you guys off if possible. Let's see. Okay, I looked through the chat. I appreciate your time. I apologize if I rambled a little bit. There was two club games today I was at, and then a PLU game, and came home and ran this, which means the brain's just a little fried. But I appreciate you guys joining. If there's not any other questions, in the meantime, please let me know at a different date. You know what I mean? My cell phone number should have been attached to that as well. I have absolutely no problem responding to text or making a phone call. Half the time, I'm going to be honest, I'm more of a phone call guy to see if we can get everything sorted out in a phone call as opposed to back-to-back emails. But yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and hope everybody has a good rest of the Sunday evening.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Peter.
Absolutely.